Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, for the first time since World War II, a U.S. submarine sinks another warship. As the war in Iran intensifies, Central Command has released dramatic images showing the U.S. sinking an Iranian warship with a torpedo. The U.S. now has more than 50,000 troops in the Middle East, with more on the way. Our Ian Pannell reports from Tel Aviv. Stranded, trapped Americans are unable to leave the Middle East. More than 20,000 flights in the region canceled since the military operation began. How can they get out? Our Marcus Moore talks with U.S. citizens trying to find a way.
4 or 5 days later, still in Doha.
I'm James Longman reporting from northern Iraq. Is the CIA funding a Kurdish opposition group to launch a ground invasion into Iran? My conversation with one of the leaders of that group.
Tonight, the Senate votes on President Trump's war powers, taking on a resolution to prevent him from continuing the operation without congressional approval, as the White House defends going to war with Iran, saying President Trump had a, quote, feeling Iran was poised to strike first.
We were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first.
Pack your headphones, the airline that is forcing flyers to keep their audio to themselves. And K-pop Demon Hunters is making history at this year's Oscars, cementing K-pop's place not only in music, but also in film.
I'm just really grateful that, people are really connecting with the lyrics, and it's beyond just a pop song. It's truly a form of therapy.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with the war in Iran and the U.S. military increasing its presence in the Middle East as Congress weighed a resolution to restrict military powers. We now know 50,000 American troops are in the region. The Pentagon released extraordinary images of a U.S. submarine sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. Roughly 180 crew members on board, 32 sailors rescued. Iran is drawing more U.S. allies into the conflict as it retaliates against multiple countries. Today, a UK fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone over Jordan, and NATO intercepted a missile over Syria heading for Turkey. You can see this man standing next to an unexploded missile near an airport in northeastern Syria. Tonight, we're learning more about some of the Army reservists killed during that attack in Kuwait. Sergeant First Class Nicola Moore was just days away from returning home to her husband and 2 children. 20-year-old Sergeant Declan Cody described as the rock of his family. And we've just learned the identities of the remaining 2 soldiers killed in that attack, Major Jeffrey O'Brien and Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzan. We have team coverage tonight. Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, leads us off again tonight.
Tonight, the war with Iran rapidly expanding. For the first time since World War II, the U.S. Navy sinking an enemy ship with a torpedo fired from a fast attack submarine. Extraordinary video from the periscope of that American sub showing the massive explosion before the Iranian warship with 180 people on board sank to the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
America is winning, decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy.
The torpedo attack happened off the coast of Sri Lanka. Authorities there recovering dozens of bodies, saying only 32 people were rescued. That ship, one of at least 20 Iranian Navy vessels, the U.S. says it's destroyed. Tonight, the Trump administration claiming U.S. and Israeli forces control the sea and the skies over Iran. President Trump saying the U.S. is in a very strong position.
We're in very good shape now. I want to let you know that, and we will continue forward. But it's a great display of military strength.
The Pentagon saying there are now more than 50,000 troops in the Middle East, with more on the way. The U.S. now set to strike deeper into Iranian territory.
More and larger waves are coming. We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant.
With officials revealing the current operation has delivered twice the air power of the shock and awe campaign of Iraq in 2003. Tonight, the Pentagon downplaying concerns U.S. missile stockpiles could run low if the war drags on.
We have sufficient precision munitions for the task at hand, both on the offense and defense. I appreciate the interest, but just know that we consider that an operational security matter.
There are also questions tonight about the number of US interceptors across the Middle East being used by multiple countries to try to block these Iranian missiles and drones. Will the interceptors last? Because military officials say it takes 2 or 3 of them to shoot down just one Iranian ballistic missile. And experts predict Iran had a stockpile of more than 2,000. Tonight, Iran launching a new wave of strikes across the Gulf. A UK fighter jet shooting down an Iranian drone over Jordan. NATO saying it intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile over Syria that was heading for Turkey, as images emerge of an Iranian missile that slammed into a Syrian field. But US and Israeli officials say the Iranian attacks have slowed down. And from inside Iran, a harrowing account from a young anti-government activist in Tehran, bravely speaking out. We're not naming her to protect her identity.
It is very, very dangerous outside. Everybody from the regime has the gun. Most of them are very ugly and furious, and they have free will to shoot everybody. They don't think about anything.
She says people are happy the supreme leader's dead, but worried the war will stop before the regime is gone. The Red Crescent reporting over 1,000 deaths, with Iranian officials expected to elect a new supreme leader. One potential candidate, Ayatollah Khamenei's own son, Mojtaba, a hardliner likely to stick to his father's legacy, according to Iranian officials familiar with the deliberations. Israel's defense minister warning if Iran's new leader followed the same path as Khamenei, he would become an unequivocal target for elimination. Tonight, the US confirming the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander, identified as the mastermind behind the 2024 plot to assassinate President Trump, has also been killed.
The leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
Ian joins us now from Tel Aviv. Ian, we have not seen a deadly torpedo attack since 1945. Tell us more about how that happened.
Yeah, and that's pretty astonishing, right? The first time since the Second World War, and used with devastating firepower. The US Navy firing on the Iranian warship. This was off the coast of Sri Lanka. So many Iranian sailors killed in that attack. And I think it shows the lengths to which that the US is prepared to go to crush Iran's military capabilities. Lindsay?
Ian, panel for us in Tel Aviv. Ian, thank you. For decades, the U.S. has supported Kurdish forces in the Middle East and elsewhere. This time is no different. Chief International Correspondent James Longman is in northern Iraq tonight. James?
Hi, Lindsay. There has been a lot of reporting over the last 24 to 48 hours that the CIA and Israel have been helping to fund and arm Iranian opposition groups here in Iraq to launch a ground invasion into Iran. These are Kurdish groups. The Kurds live across 4 countries in this region, and they have worked with the United States many times before in the coalition to fight ISIS in Iraq and Syria. People might remember in the first Gulf War that the United States offered help to the Kurds in the fight against Saddam Hussein, only to cut that help off, and then there was a brutal crackdown against the Kurds then. Well, it does seem like there is a plan in the offing. This individual, Omar Baluchi, did not want to confirm it, but tellingly he did not deny that this is something that might indeed happen. I put it to him that Americans would be watching and they might be worried about another forever war. He said very simply, we are ready for anything. And he said Americans should finish what they started. They owe us help and they should fix it. He told me that they haven't received any official confirmation from the United States, but he would say that. He doesn't want to reveal the plans at this stage. But like I said, it does feel to us that something might be happening here, if indeed it is the case that the United States is going to fund a ground invasion into Iran, arm it, possibly offer it air support, then that totally changes the dynamic of this war. Lindsay?
James, thank you. The Pentagon has identified some of the 6 Army reservists killed during a drone strike in Kuwait. Their unit was out of Des Moines, Iowa, the youngest reservist just 20 years old. We're now hearing from some of their families about their lives at home and their dedication to service. Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz reports from Tel Aviv.
Tonight, we are learning more about the first American soldiers who were killed in that Iranian drone strike in Kuwait.
I still don't fully think it's real. I didn't think it was real when they told us.
Sergeant Declan Cody was from Des Moines and just 20 years old. His sister Kira recalling the moment the doorbell rang and she got the news.
I just really wish I got to tell him I love him one more time because he was just so amazing.
He had just been recommended for a promotion from specialist to sergeant. He was promoted posthumously. 39-year-old Sergeant First Class Nicola Moore, a mother of two, was just days away from returning to her family in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Husband Joey spoke to her just 2 hours before she was killed, telling the AP, "You don't go to Kuwait thinking something's going to happen." 42-year-old Sergeant First Class Noah Teachins, a father to a teenage son, had just 3 months left on his tour. His twin brother Nicholas telling the New York Times he just wanted to get there and get it over with and get back. John Coleman served alongside Teachins.
You could call him day or night. He always took the time. You know, he made you feel important. And that's hard to find sometimes in the military.
Captain Cody Cork's family says the 35-year-old lived with purpose, loved deeply, and served honorably. Childhood friend Chase Smith.
He's just all-around good dude. You know, nobody would have thought in a million years it'd be him.
Late tonight, the Pentagon identified 2 other soldiers killed in that Iranian drone attack in Kuwait. Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, of Indianola, Iowa, and Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California. Lindsay, President Trump will be there for the dignified transfer of the soldiers' remains at Dover Air Force Base. But the president has said these may not be the last American service members killed in this war, saying that more casualties are expected. Lindsay?
Martha, thank you. We're joined now by ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy. Mick, thanks so much for joining us. Today, President Trump said the Iranian Navy and Air Force have been, quote, knocked out. Earlier, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, said U.S. forces would strike deeper into Iran. How do you see the military's next moves playing out?
So, Lindsay, I think we're shifting from the really cruise missile-based attacks on a lot of the facilities that include the nuclear, ballistic, and naval capacity of Iran to a aircraft-based attack system, because that is what we have more of, quite frankly. We have gravity bombs that are GPS-guided. We have less TLAMs because we've used them in the initial phases. I think the whole plan right now is to degrade their capacity to wage war against their enemies. Obviously from the nuclear side, but also the ballistic missile side and the naval side, because that is what's the biggest concern when it comes to blockading the Straits of Hormuz, which is where 20% of the world's energy supply actually flows. So I think the next phase of the military operation is to systematically degrade their military so that it cannot wage war against its neighbors.
We know that a U.S. sub torpedoed and sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean, the first time the U.S. has done that since World War II. What does that tell you about the different strategies that the U.S. is pursuing in this war?
So certainly there's going to be questions on the international legality of what we're doing. But from a military perspective, that was a valid military target because from everything we've heard, it was going back to defend its country. And as soon as it got back in the Persian Gulf, it would be an enemy combatant ship. And that's why I think the U.S. Navy took it out where it did. Again, that's a military view of this, not a international legal view of this. But it was a valid military target and should have been on notice that it was a combatant.
Today, the White House said that it's not currently planning to put troops on the ground in Iran, but would not rule it out. What would it take to get to that point?
So, Lindsay, I think they just don't want to rule it out because they don't want to give any indication what they might do. I really don't think politically it's a viable option to put forces on the ground. If that would be the case, we would definitely know about it. It would take 2 to 3 times as many troops mobilized as it did to go into Iraq in 2003. It is 4 times the geographic size of Iraq. It's 2 times the population size of Iraq. So we would definitely know if we were going to stage a large-scale ground invasion. Now, that's not including of course, the CIA and special operations units, which could be used for very limited purposes and not really included in what I would call a ground invasion.
And just shifting gears here, we're going to discuss this topic a bit later in the show. But yesterday, the U.S. and Ecuador carried out a joint military operation against cartels. The U.S. military's role was more advising Ecuadorian troops. What might this signal about how the U.S. plans to deal with cartels going forward?
So, Lindsay, this Ecuador is transit point for a lot of the cocaine that comes out of Colombia and Peru going into the United States, working side by side with our partners there. It was at the invitation of the president of Ecuador that U.S. forces supported both logistically, operationally, and of course, intelligence-wise, the Ecuadorian military to go interdict and fight these cartels, Los Lobos being one of the most significant. I think this is just an indication this is how the U.S. wants to fight this war, primarily through partners. If we have to, of course, we can also use the CIA and special operations, but this is the preferred way of doing it. We help support them. They fight these cartels, and we stop the flow of illegal, illicit narcotics to the United States.
Mick Mulroy, so appreciate your time and insight. Thank you. Today at the White House, President Trump graded the U.S. military operation thus far on a scale of 1 to 10 as, quote, about 15. And late today, Senate Democrats tried to force a war powers vote to restrict military action without congressional approval. We're joined in a moment by Republican Senator James Lankford. But first, here's our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce.
Tonight, 5 days into the war with Iran, President Trump giving the American operation a glowing grade.
We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
But Democrats furious Trump went to war without congressional approval as required by the Constitution.
The power to declare war is ours. If we give it up, then we are turning our back on the Constitution and our responsibility to the American people.
Today, Democrats trying to force a war powers vote to prevent further U.S. military action without congressional approval.
The motion to discharge is not approved.
But Republicans blocked it.
You don't have to authorize military operations. They can go on as long as the president wants them to go on until you cut off funding.
Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. And Mary, that key war powers vote has failed. What else are Republicans saying about it?
Well, Lindsay, Republicans are adamant that the president doesn't need congressional authorization for this fight going forward. In fact, the House Speaker Mike Johnson claiming today that this isn't a war at all. But here at the White House, the president has been clear, calling it exactly that. Lindsay.
All right, Mary Bruce for us. Thanks so much, Mary. For more now, we're joined by Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford. Senator, as always, we thank you so much for your time. You've said that the key question over whether this use of force was authorized was over what constitutes an imminent threat. There have been conflicting explanations from administration officials over that. To the best of your knowledge, do you believe that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States?
I do, actually. So they've had over 180 attacks on American or American citizens or American locations just since 2023. They've obviously funded the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah. We have about 750,000 Americans that live in that region, that live in Jordan, that live in the UAE, or live in Saudi Arabia or Israel or Egypt or Turkey. There's a lot of Americans that are in harm's way. And there seems to be this perception among some that if there's an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach Kansas, that it's not a threat. Well, that's not true, with so many Americans actually live and work in that area. So there's an ongoing threat that has continued from Iran, and they've obviously focused on trying to get their nuclear weapons program up and going, getting their ballistic missiles program and their conventional program to a level that they couldn't be attacked. So this was an accelerating threat the president had to make some hard decisions on.
You just mentioned the many Americans who live in the region, and the administration had been moving assets into the area for weeks. But now, as you know, tens of thousands of Americans are stranded in the region. Right. Anything that the State Department should have done better to prevent Americans from being stuck?
Oh, no, the State Department was very clear for weeks, and moving people out of embassies, moving people out of military facilities, making it very clear what the threats were. You can go to state.gov, and we've encouraged people to be able to do this that are in the area to notify the State Department where they are. That allows State Department to say if we need to evacuate in certain areas, they can get aircraft and they can actually contact people. So They had that stood up immediately to be able to help people start moving out and to be able to form a plan. But it's not that this was a great surprise to anyone. This has been building for a while.
Tim Kaine and Rand Paul's War Powers resolution was voted on today. Republicans other than Rand Paul voted it down. Why did you personally vote against it?
I voted against it, number one, because we have military in the field right now, and Iran is attacking about 10 or 11 other nations currently in that area as well. And to be able to say to our troops, we don't support you and the ongoing work you're doing to be able to protect Americans and to protect our allies, I think undercuts the work that's happening there.
The president sent a War Powers resolution notification to Congress on Monday night. If there's no authorization from Congress within a 60 to 90-day period, the default is the withdrawal of American forces. Would you support an authorization for the use of military force?
Yeah, we've got to get through the next couple of weeks here to be able to determine. The president's been very, very focused on this to be able to try to get as much done as we can in a very short period of time. No one wants to see a forever war. No one's looking for a long-term war in the Middle East again. We've seen that movie before and don't want to do that again. But I think we've got to be able to get through this first couple of weeks. We've literally been only a few days of this operation at this point. I'm not willing to be able to undercut the mission at this point. We need to be able to complete it. This is a brutal regime that has attacked Americans for 47 years, over and over and over again, whether it's Marines in their barracks, whether it's ambassadors, whether it's trying to assassinate U.S. presidents, whether it's launching into civilians in countries all over the region, or being able to attack Americans even on American soil.
Obviously, no one knows the time frame here, but do you believe that this operation will be over within 90 days?
I think it can. Obviously, with any military operation, you can't plan the whole thing out to the precise day. It's a military operation. Many things are unpredictable, but so far it is moving ahead of schedule.
What do you see as Congress's role in this war?
Continued oversight, engagement with the administration, as we've already done multiple times. We'll have to discuss funding. The ultimate way to be able to determine whether you support or don't support any battle that's actually going on is whether Congress will actually fund it. That is the first task of any Congress, is actually the funding mechanism on it. The administration's already said they're going to need supplemental funding at some point through this battle to be able to continue that. And so that will come up, and we'll have the opportunity to be able to weigh in during that time period as well.
Senator James Lankford, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You bet.
Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor James Sample, who's also a professor of constitutional law at Hofstra University, to help us understand the legality of everything that's unfolding so quickly before us. James, in the last few days, the administration has provided various explanations for why it launched strikes on Iran and when. We know that the president's role as commander-in-chief extends to the conduct of war, but not the initiation of it. In the eyes of the law, was the use of military force lawful here?
And Lindsay, in the eyes of the law, it was not lawful, but it certainly not as a formal matter of domestic law under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the power to declare war. But there is a very important modifier in that answer I just gave, which is formal, which is to say that in the early days of the Republic, founders ranging from George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, who had very different views on a range of issues, all thought that Article 1, Section 8 was a meaningful and genuine broad limit on presidential discretion with respect to military hostilities. There is zero doubt, though, that over the last several decades, going back 50, 60, 70 years, that particular norm has eroded to the point where presidents of both parties have undertaken military actions similar, not necessarily the same as this one, without that congressional authorization. What we have now with the War Powers resolution that you were discussing there with Senator Lankford is almost an authorization for at least a time, and then maybe the clock runs out. It is a very, very backwards system that we have adopted. It's not necessarily consistent with the Constitution, but it has become practice in the United States.
And so let's really kind of zero in on that for a moment, because the president communicated a War Powers resolution to Congress Monday night. There must be authorization from Congress within a 60 to 90-day period before American forces are withdrawn from the region. Break down what that means exactly, and what are some ways that the resolution can fail in practice?
Well, the first way it fails in practice, Lindsay, is that it gets voted down. And today was the 8th time that a War Powers resolution has been voted down by this Congress just in Donald Trump's second term. Say that again. 8 particular war powers resolutions in Congress have now been voted down in just the first year and change of the second administration. So we're talking about Venezuela. We're talking about the boat strikes in the Caribbean. What the War Powers Act says is that the president needs to consult with Congress within 48 days of initiating hostilities, and then Congress has the opportunity to essentially force a withdrawal, although whether or not they would actually be able to effectuate that withdrawal is another matter, within 60 days by voting against the War Powers Resolution, by passing a War Powers Resolution. If, however, at the end of 60 days, unless the president gets an extension to 90 days, there is no congressional authorization for the use of military force, an AUMF, something that existed, for example, in the Iraq War, something that existed in the first Gulf War. What Donald Trump has not done here is what did happen in those earlier instances that I referenced, which is to say those presidents who initiated those conflicts first got the AUMF. That didn't happen here. So in theory, at the end of a 60 or 90 with an extension day period, the president is up against a rigid deadline without additional congressional action.
James Sample, our thanks for your time. Today, the House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi over the investigation into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Lawmakers on both sides were frustrated over how Bondi has handled the release of the Epstein files. More than 3 million pages have been released. Lawmakers are upset that millions of documents still have not been disclosed, claiming video, audio, and other records are being withheld by the Justice Department. Texans cast their ballots in a primary that could help determine control of the U.S. Senate. The heated Republican Senate primary is now heading to a runoff, and the rising Democratic star who lost her primary battle. Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl has the details.
Tonight, Democrats see an opening in deep red Texas. State lawmaker James Tallarico, an aspiring Presbyterian minister, defeated Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in the primary to become the Democratic candidate for Senate. Tallarico is running against what he calls the politics of division, emphasizing compassion.
Now, I notice you don't talk about Trump very much, at least in your ads. It's not like much of a factor. Why is that?
Well, aren't we all tired of talking about Donald Trump? It's been 10 years. I want to talk about something else.
The president is front and center in the Republican Senate primary, where incumbent John Cornyn is facing a bruising runoff against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton.
I refuse to allow a flawed, self-centered, and shameless candidate like Ken Paxton risk everything we've worked so hard to build over these many years.
Paxton accuses Cornyn of being disloyal to President Trump.
For too long, he stabbed our president in the back by trying to derail his presidential campaigns.
Today, Trump announced, quote, "I will be making my endorsement soon and will be asking the candidate that I don't endorse to immediately drop out of the race."
Jonathan Karl joins us now. John, so the million-dollar question, who do you think President Trump will endorse?
Well, look, there's been a lot of speculation today that he's going to endorse John Cornyn. That's certainly what John Thune, the Republican leader in the Senate, hopes. But I just a short while ago spoke to the White House, spoke to also others close to the president. I truly believe he has not made up his mind here. He's actually hoping for some kind of a deal where one of them drops out in exchange for God knows what, but he's hoping to get some kind of an agreement. But I don't see any sign of it right now. I got to tell you that, Lindsay.
And huge Democratic voter turnout last night. We saw it as the votes were coming in. Why do Democrats think that James Tallarico can succeed where others have failed?
Man, they've really hoped in the past. Do you remember Beto O'Rourke? They thought he had a great chance in 2018 against Ted Cruz. Colin Allred in 2024. But this time they believe they have a candidate who is actually able to appeal to Republicans in Texas. And let's face it, you're not going to win statewide in Texas unless you get a lot of independents voting for you and at least some Republicans. And they believe Tallarico, with his evangelical Christian past, the idea that he is an aspiring Presbyterian minister. This is a guy who quotes the Bible in his speeches. They believe that he will bring over some Republicans as well.
Jonathan Karl for us. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
Coming up, the new United Airlines requirement for passengers on board their flights, plus hundreds of tons of drugs pass through Ecuador's ports each year. We examine the United States' anti-drug efforts by the numbers. But next, the Americans stuck in the crosshairs of war.
We're doing everything we can to get a land border crossing out of here because the missiles and drones keep attacking.
As the war with Iran continues, the State Department is scrambling to help tens of thousands of stranded Americans whose efforts to leave the region have been impeded by flight cancellations and airstrikes. Our Marcus Moore reports from Qatar tonight.
You can hear the siren behind me.
Amidst the hail of drone strikes and the wail of sirens, Alyssa Ramos is desperately seeking a way out of Kuwait.
We're doing everything we can to get a land border crossing out of here because the missiles and drones keep attacking.
The American travel expert seeing smoke and watching missile interceptors from her hotel window. She's been documenting this new war since her arrival while simultaneously looking for an escape route.
We are finally evacuating Kuwait on our own terms by land. The government has not helped us at all.
The Kuwait airport shut down after a drone strike. Stories like hers adding increasing pressure to get the government to help.
We have seen the government's post today telling all Americans to evacuate on their own. I can hear the missiles overhead already.
U.S. embassies and consulates coming under attack and Americans stranded across the region.
But escaping has not been easy.
Even cruise ships in the region are forced to wait out the conflict for now. Traveling home from a business trip in India, Ryan Blackman was on the last leg of his journey home to Dallas when he realized his flight was being diverted.
Saw some breaking news that Iranian airspace would be restricted. My initial reaction was probably land, refuel, find a different route, maybe head west, and then 4 or 5 days later, still in Doha.
With few choices, he says staying put seems the safest option for him. What have you done to try to find a way out?
Right now, what I've heard is there are individuals that are taking buses or ground transportation to Riyadh or other locations in the region, or kind of sitting tight in Doha is kind of one of two options. My current feeling is I feel safe in Doha.
In the Oval Office, the president faced with tough questions.
Why wasn't there an evacuation plan, and will you send planes to get people out?
Well, because it happened all very quickly.
Not long after that back and forth, the State Department announced it was looking at military aircraft and chartered flights for Americans trapped in the Middle East.
It all starts by knowing that where you are and how we can get a hold of you.
The White House later seeming to place blame on the Americans who are still stranded in the region.
The Secretary of State issued level 4 travel advisories dating back to January for many of these countries in the region. Again, I just laid out for you that there have been plans in place and that the State Department has been very clear to the American people traveling within this region not to travel to these regions. We gave notices to leave immediately.
So far, the government says 17,500 Americans have returned from the region, with at least 14 countries now caught in the crosshairs. Many more Americans are left to get out, mostly on their own. This map showing the blackout of air travel, with airstrikes the biggest concern.
I had the best trip of my life before the worst trip of my life.
On his way home from a wedding in India, Oliver Sims changed planes in Doha, Qatar. The connection and takeoff seemed to go smoothly enough.
An hour and a half into the flight, I got a notification that said that the U.S. And Israel had started airstrikes on Iran. We had to turn back around to go to Doha. I think it was 12:30 in the morning. A bunch of airport staff rushed into the lounge and they told us to evacuate the airport. People had started reporting that the Kuwait's airport and Dubai's airport were getting hit.
Dramatic videos posted online show the explosions and rocket intercepts inside Qatar and over its skies.
So I'm just constantly in a state of fear, and any type of noise or thud that I hear, I'm like, is that an explosion? Is that a missile?
Some travelers got creative in attempts to leave the region. Our Brett Clinton spoke with one American who was desperately trying to get home to Nashville, Tennessee to her children via Hong Kong.
Okay, and you just came in from Dubai, the first flight in several days from Dubai. How do you feel right now?
So relieved.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It must have been quite an ordeal for you.
Just something you never think you're going to see.
You obviously contacted the embassy. Did you get any help?
Zero help. Zero help from the embassy. Got prayer beads.
Alyssa and her friends were able to hire a car and drive to Saudi Arabia.
We made it! We are passing the Riyadh airport. Not feeling super confident about this flight taking off. The airport's pretty empty.
After days of waiting, Alyssa eventually made it to Egypt, where she is one step closer to safety. The gravity of the war in this moment is not lost on Ryan in Doha.
It's very easy for us to be comfortable at home and take for granted many of the things that we can take for granted at home. And I think being thrust into the middle of a situation like this certainly gives you a heightened sense of awareness of just how much is happening outside of your space.
And while Ryan waits for safe passage home from Doha, his thoughts are with his wife and children.
What is that moment going to be like when you see
your
wife and those little kiddos?
It's going to feel good. Yeah, it's going to feel good. Yeah, I think you might have hit a little bit of an emotional chord with me, because I probably put that a little bit in the back of my head, but it'll certainly feel good.
Our thanks to Marcus for that. The State Department says their task force has helped 6,500 Americans with options and guidance on leaving the region. And we're hearing late tonight, at least one charter flight has left the Middle East and en route for the U.S. They're encouraging Americans to call the hotline at the bottom of your screen for help. And still ahead, a second day of testimony before the House Judiciary Committee for Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, as many lawmakers are critical over her agency's immigration and enforcement operations. And as Ecuadorian and U.S. military forces launch operations against designated terrorist organizations inside Ecuador, we take a look at America's anti-drug efforts by the numbers. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Video released by the Pentagon shows the moment a U.S. submarine torpedoed and sank an Iranian warship with roughly 180 crew members on board. 32 sailors were rescued from the Indian Ocean. It was the first time since 1945 a U.S. sub sank an enemy ship. U.S. Central Command is reporting that more than 20 Iranian ships have been struck or sunk since the war began. This is all happening as the Senate rejected a Democratic-led Iran war powers resolution that called for congressional approval for military action against Iran. The resolution would have directed the removal of U.S. armed forces from engagements against Iran. It failed by a vote of 47 to 53. Meanwhile, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem testified before the House Judiciary Committee over her agency's immigration enforcement operations, facing a continued bipartisan grilling as top Democrat Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland claimed she turned our government against our people. Noem pushed back, calling his comments falsehoods and lies. Coming up, cracking down on drug cartels, the new operation the U.S. military is helping to launch in Ecuador. We examine the United States anti-drug efforts by the numbers. And a frozen food recall over potential glass contamination. We have those details. Welcome back, everyone. The Pentagon announced that Ecuadorian and U.S. military forces have launched operations against designated terrorist organizations inside the country. This marks the first time the U.S. military assisted a land operation against South American drug cartels, though specific details like location and scope of the operation remain scarce. Ecuador in recent years has become a critical logistical hub in the global drug trade. Hundreds of tons of cocaine pass through Ecuador's ports, bound for Europe and the United States. Let's examine the United States' anti-drug efforts by the numbers. The United States gave Ecuador nearly $20 million in security commitments in support of the country's fight against drug cartels. That includes more than $13 million in general security funding, plus $6 million in drone technology for the Ecuadorian Navy. Killings in Ecuador have increased despite efforts to combat gang violence tied to the drug trade. Homicides rose 40% in 2025 compared to the same period in 2024. In the neighboring country of Colombia, since 2000, the U.S. spent more than $10 billion in counter-narcotics and security efforts. And in Mexico, the United States has provided more than $3 billion to combat transnational organized crime, drug trafficking, and violence since 2008. Coming up, why a record number of Americans are pulling from their 401ks, and United Airlines is taking new measures to ensure passengers have a more quiet experience. Those details coming up. child stuck in a claw machine, a frozen food recall, and the airline now saying you must wear headphones. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. A child had the time of his life while stuck inside a claw machine in Missouri. Ryan Campbell said that he was recently watching his daughter's game at a recreational center when he looked over and saw his 3-year-old son Patrick inside the machine. When asked why he crawled inside the machine, 3-year-old Patrick simply said, "I get bald." Just weeks ago, the same thing happened at the same claw machine to another child. Local firefighters have even put together a special toolkit in case another child becomes trapped inside the claw machine. A frozen food company announced it's recalling more than 33 million pounds of its products, including popular frozen meals sold at Trader Joe's. The recall affects various frozen chicken and pork fried rice, ramen, and shumai dumpling products. According to the FDA, the products may be contaminated with foreign material, including glass. Affected products have best buy dates ranging from February 28, 2026 through August 19th of 2027. 2 firefighters are speaking out after they helped rescue 2 people who were trapped in a hot air balloon more than 900 feet in the air in Texas. Longview Fire Department Lieutenant Stephen Winchell and firefighter Cliff Patrick called the incident the Super Bowl of rope rescues. Winchell and Patrick said it took more than an hour for rescue crews to climb a cell phone tower and rescue the passengers of a hot air balloon which had crashed into the tower. The passengers had to climb out of the basket while suspended mid-air in 20-mile-an-hour wind, but were brought down to the ground safely.
It was a very rewarding experience to be able to be a part of that.
New data released by investment manager Vanguard shows that more Americans than ever are tapping into the 401k retirement savings. The money manager says a record 6% of workers took a hardship withdrawal from their accounts last year. According to Vanguard, the median withdrawal was $1,600, and the most common reasons for the withdrawal were avoiding foreclosure or paying medical bills. Next time you step on a United Airlines flight, be sure to bring your headphones. The airline has updated its policy to require passengers to use headphones when listening to audio or watching video content. According to the new policy, United can refuse transport, remove a passenger from the flight, or in some cases permanently ban customers who did not adhere to the policy. The rule also states that a passenger removed from the flight might be eligible for a refund. United is not the only line with this policy, and other airlines also have similar policies in place. The largest acidic geyser in the world is erupting again at Yellowstone National Park after several years of dormancy, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. A 66-foot geyser pool located in the hottest and most dynamic part of Yellowstone's thermal areas has been largely dormant since 2020, but repeated surges of the geyser began in early February. The first eruption since 2020 occurred on February 7th, with several more occurring throughout the month and some reaching nearly 30 feet high. Acidic geysers are rare because acidic water can break down the rock within the geyser's plumbing system. The majority of the acidic geysers on the planet are located at Yellowstone. The road to the Oscars continues with our series highlighting this year's historic Oscars nominations. For the first time, one nomination for Best Original Song goes to a K-pop genre. Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters has been the earworm that many just can't get enough of. We sat down with some of the creators of this hit film and song at this year's Oscars luncheon. It was the song of the summer and the fall and the winter. And now, for the first time in Academy Awards history, Golden from the animated movie K-pop Demon Hunters is the first song in the K-pop genre to be nominated for Best Original Song.
It means so much because that's exactly what, Golden did, and it helped me go through a hard time. So I'm just really grateful that, people are really connecting with the lyrics, and it's beyond just a pop song. It's truly a form of therapy.
Co-writer of Golden and lead singer EJ is taking this Oscar moment with gratitude.
We work so hard. I think for me, because I've been a K-pop idol trainee for so long, since 11, and to see where my life is now, it's just so many windy roads, but I feel incredibly proud.
But Golden
equated to Let It Go from Frozen. It is the song that's played on repeat in our homes. Parents are going through it with their kids because they're playing it still to this day, and they've been playing it since June.
The film, also nominated in the animated feature category, follows a K-pop girl group called Huntrix. The band members lead double lives.
A demon's a demon. We kill them.
No, it's too public. As demon hunters who face off against the Saja Boys, a rival boy band whose members are secretly demons. Writer and director Maggie Kang wanted to create a story inspired by her South Korean heritage.
I mean, we're so grateful for the fans. They really carried this movie, and really, it just blossomed with word of mouth. They were just making content like so quickly, so it was like kind of like free marketing, I want to say.
For EJ, this historic recognition is validation. She trained for years to become a pop idol in Seoul, only to be told she was just not good enough.
Waited so long to break these walls down, to wake up and feel like me. Put these patterns all in the past now, and finally live like the girl they all see.
I really love the character. Like Rumi, I just resonated with her so much. So I think with every writer, it's like we put a little bit of our own personal experience into it. Writing Golden, for example, like singing the demo, I was like crying while singing it. It was very cathartic. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it really, literally lifted me up during a really hard time.
And it is like you write to the movie, to the story, and from your own personal experience, but you hope that it's going to be universal anytime you're writing a song. And I think that's part of what the surprise of it all's been.
No surprise that it reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
We performed at the Clive Davis pre-Grammy show, and while walking up, Stevie Wonder was walking down. So I was like, no. And I was so nervous, my mic was just like shaking. That's what makes me keep going on stage. I think that's when all the nerves go away. And when I really focus on the lyrics and see people like singing it with me, that synergy is a spiritual experience.
I think Golden really stands the best shot at winning Best Original Song.
And I'll be live from outside the Dolby Theater in Hollywood, co-hosting On the Red Carpet at the Oscars, starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, Sunday, March 15th on ABC and streaming on ABC News Live, followed by the 98th Academy Awards at 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC and streaming live on Disney+. Thanks so much for streaming with us. I'm Lindsay Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Have a great night.